From using the same screen name after already being caught, to getting arrested twice in a single day, these were the dumbest predators ever caught on To Catch a Predator. First one on our list is Dustin McFetridge from the Bowling Green, Kentucky sting. Dustin drove more than 5 hours across state lines to meet someone he believed was a young teenage girl. And he didn't show up empty-handed, he brought a kit. Inside the bag was an electric razor, a bottle of KY jelly, and a camera. Because of course, nothing says this is totally innocent like bringing the same supplies you'd expect on a low IQ Bond villain to carry. He even casually explained to the decoy that his razor was for shaving her down there because, well, that was his idea of being smooth. But then Chris Hansen stepped into the room, and instantly Dustin's confidence just disappeared. Chris started reading Dustin's own messages right back to him, and Dustin started to scramble for excuses however he could. First, he claimed he misunderstood the situation, that the chat log wasn't serious. He also claimed that he didn't mean that kind of shaving. But then came the moment that defines Dustin's entire legacy on the show. Chris told him he's not even law enforcement, so he starts talking. A completely normal person would understand that to mean, I'm not a cop, but cops exist. Dustin, however, somehow heard, oh, so nobody gets arrested here. And here's the absolute best part. He actually held on to that misunderstanding all the way until the moment he walked out the door, where the police immediately took him down. Dustin looked genuinely shocked, like he witnessed a glitch in the Matrix. But it gets even better. In court, he actually argued that Chris lied to him by saying he wasn't law enforcement, as if those words were supposed to serve him a get-out-of-jail-free card. Investigators later pointed out something really disturbing. Dustin actually had a history of getting into trouble, and his mother had a very long pattern of talking people out of pressing charges against him. Dustin thought one sentence could save him, but Lauren Armstrong took things a lot further by building an entire fantasy with a 13-year-old and then trying to talk his way out of hundreds of pages of his own words. It was Lauren's 37th birthday, a day most people spend with a nice cake and maybe a party hat. Lauren, on the other hand, spent his thinking it'd be perfect for a completely different kind of celebration. He pulled up to his sting house with someone he considered a gift, a cheap bracelet that cost $5, as if that was gonna win over a 13-year-old in 2007. He had been chatting online with Kayla, professing love, promising marriage, and even calling her Mrs. Carrie Kayla Marie Armstrong. Yes, marriage. A 13-year-old. According to the show, the chat logs literally had hundreds of messages. When he arrived, he wasn't awkward at all. He seemed calm, cocky even. He took a seat, pretty much like he owned the place, then he asked for a kiss, like that's how he was planning to kick off the night. Then came the moment the birthday party ended. As soon as Chris Hansen walked in and started reading parts of the chat log, including the proposals, the Mrs. Kayla Marie line, and the bracelet gift plan, Lauren's calm cracked. Lauren started to blame his actions on a past catfishing, acting like someone else used his account. When Chris bluntly explained this was a televised investigation, not a catfish gone wrong, Lauren's entire world collapsed. He uttered that now famous cry of panic,
Cool.
After that, he tried nothing. No clever excuses, and definitely no, I didn't mean that. He just caved. When police officers asked to search his trunk and computer, even though the evidence was already enough, Lauren didn't push back. He gave consent immediately, and the detective even said, he's toast. Lauren showed up with a $5 bracelet and a marriage proposal. But Calvin Lee Greer showed up acting like the biggest problem in his night was a missing soda. Calvin Lee Greer was in Florida on a business trip, which apparently came with enough downtime to strike up conversations he absolutely shouldn't have. He chatted from his hotel room, planned a meetup, and even described the vehicle he'd be driving. Except, when he actually pulled up to the sting house, he arrived in a completely different car. This threw the whole Predator catching assembly line off for a moment. Chris Hansen and the perverted justice crew watched him walk up, and absolutely nobody recognized him. It took Del Harvey squinting at the monitor, replaying details, and finally saying, "That's him." Once Calvin stepped inside the house, he didn't come empty-handed. He actually brought dinner. His own dinner. A bag of fast food. As he walked in, he explained very casually that it was a double cheeseburger with no pickles. The fries might be very cold by now, and the sodas he ordered never showed up. But the best part of this episode was when Chris Hansen walked in. Calvin definitely wasn't ready for that. His posture stiffened instantly, and it became clear he didn't know whether to hide the food, finish eating it, or just evaporate in the thin air. Chris started by reading back Calvin's online conversations, from the hotel chat logs and the plans to the arrival details. Calvin tried to claim he was just stopping by, or that this wasn't really what it looked like, but the fast food bag on the counter wasn't helping that excuse. Next was the arrest, and with it was one of the most unexpected sound effects ever produced by a grown adult. When the police surrounded him outside, Calvin's voice suddenly slipped into a goofy-style shout, "Oh Lord." Calvin walked in complaining about cold fries, but Kevin Payne walked in thinking he was smarter than every predator who came before him. Kevin Payne arrived at the Sting house expecting a decoy posing as a 15-year-old girl. The instant he saw Chris Hansen, Kevin rushed into his truck. Deputies apprehended him there, and Hansen later described them as faster than Santa's reindeer. When they pulled him back inside, he begged not to be put on TV.
I'm not be on TV, please.
Highly admitted he hated himself.
I hate myself so much.
When Chris asked what he would have done if Hansen hadn't showed up, Kevin said that he would have just gone home. Like none of this was ever meant to lead somewhere that serious. But then came to the part that absolutely killed me. Kevin knew who Chris Hansen was. He said he'd seen the shows before, and his big defense was he thought the predators caught in them were dumb. Chris pressed him on some of the chat things he said, and Kevin replied by asking Chris to go easy because he'd already been so hard on himself. By the end of it, Payne broke down crying, and the deputies had to calm him as they took him away. Thinking predators are dumb is one thing, but Victor Wells? That guy somehow convinced himself he was the only one smart enough to outwit the entire operation. Victor Wells was 49, married, and had 2 kids, yet somehow thought it was smart enough to spend days chatting with someone he believed was a 12-year-old girl named Beth. You can see the moment his plan collapses just by watching what he brought to the house. He showed up with a Wendy's bag, a 6-pack of Mike's Hard Lemonade, and a camera. Yeah, totally innocent. What could be more innocent than showing up with dinner, alcohol, and recording equipment? Before he even walked inside, the decoy could barely keep a straight face. Victor tried to act calm, but there's this jittery, nervous smile that looks like he already knows this day will haunt him forever. When the decoy asked him about the food, he instantly pointed to the Wendy's bag. And then Chris Hansen stepped in. The change in Victor's face was almost quick. He just started explaining himself before Chris even asked a question. Chris pulled out the chat logs, and Victor fired off his first excuse. He was only there to take profile pictures for the girl. Chris asked him how old he thought Beth was. Victor gave the most awkward half-truth imaginable. "I'm guessing older than 12. Chris showed him the actual messages, where Victor acknowledged multiple times that she said she was 12. Victor's defense was that no 12-year-old would use Yahoo. That's seriously what he goes with. Quartered with photos he sent, the alcohol he brought, and his own messages, he grabbed onto one last explanation. It was just roleplay. He repeated it over and over. Even when Chris read the graphic lines straight back to him, Victor insisted the chat logs were pretend. The visit was pretend. Everything was pretend. He somehow stuck onto this fantasy all the way to the door. The second he stepped outside, officers moved in and took him down. Victor thought just roleplay could magically erase reality, but Michael Saber didn't even bother with new excuses, and you won't believe what he did. Michael Saber first showed up in Riverside, California, where he explained that he'd been dropped on his head as a baby, lived with a brain injury, and struggled with seizures. After the first sting, he was arrested, released on bail, and told to stay offline. Most people would take that as a sign to lay low. Michael instead waited 8 months and jumped right back online, using the same username the detectives have already had in their files. Even in the chat, he admitted he knew he was playing with fire, typing out the line, "I don't want to get caught again." He kept asking if the girl is a cop, but the decoy kept assuring him she was not law enforcement. And Michael decided that was enough clearance to go ahead and risk his entire freedom for round 2. Then came the Long Beach sting. Michael walked into the house like a man who already knew this was going to end badly, but didn't know how to stop himself. When Chris Hansen stepped out, Michael froze. He looked like he was watching a ghost reappear to ruin his life all over again. Chris even reminded him right on the spot that this wasn't their first meeting. Michael tried to come up with some decoy about forgetting the rules while out on bail, but nothing worked. When Chris finally ended the interview, Michael walked out to the door knowing exactly what was waiting for him. The moment he stepped outside, officers swarmed and took him down for the second time in 8 months. The judge later made it clear that this round wasn't going to end like the first one, because Michael had already had past intercourse offenses on his record. The court noted he was no longer eligible for the kind of plea deal first-timers sometimes get. Michael at least waited 8 months before doing the same thing again, but John Canelli couldn't even wait a full day, proving legendary stupidity has levels, and he is right at the very. John Canelli was 43, unemployed, and told the decoy he was a 29-year-old teacher using the screen name Special Guy 29. He moved fast too. It took him about 1 hour from the first message to deciding he was going to drive straight to the Sting house. The decoy joked that if he didn't wear underwear, he should just come in naked. Canelli agreed, like it was the most normal suggestion in the world. When he arrived, he was holding a 12-pack of beer, walked through the garage, and got right into it. He completely stripped naked except for his socks. He sat on a stool with his eyes closed, counting to 100 because he was expecting the boy to walk out naked too. Chris Hansen walked out, and Canelli was shocked. He didn't even try to talk at first. He just stood there holding his breath, like maybe if he stayed perfectly still, Chris Hansen wouldn't see him. Chris handed him a towel, and when Canelli finally got dressed, Chris noticed the one thing that instantly destroyed Canelli's earlier claim. He was wearing underwear. Canelli got escorted out, and you think that maybe be the last time anyone hears from him. But then came the sequel, and it's somehow even worse. Less than 24 hours later, he was back online. Same screen name, same behavior, same area too. Except this time, he changed his name to Shane and reached out to another decoy who said he was a 13-year-old boy. Canelli set up a McDonald's meetup and even asked the boy to show up without underwear. The next day at McDonald's, Canelli sat at a table like nothing was wrong. Chris walked in again, and this time much more direct. Canelli's eyes went wide like he was seeing a ghost. His excuse was,
"I just came to get something to eat."
Just like that, he was caught twice in less than 24 hours, in the same metro area, by the same show, using a screen name that was already burned the day before. If you want something a bit different, then check out our other video about Chris Hansen shutting down arrogant predators.